That morning, Manhattan was bathed in gold. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse office, coffee in hand, watching the city come alive. It should have been a peaceful moment. But my phone rang and everything changed. I answered, recognizing Amanda's number instantly. "Seriously, Jessica? Fired again?" Her voice dripped with mockery before I could even say hello. I closed my eyes for a second, letting her words roll over me like cold rain. "Actually," I said quietly, "I resigned." She laughed. That sharp, dismissive laugh only siblings can perfect. "Right. Because people totally resign from six-figure consulting jobs in this economy." "God, you're pathetic." Her words cut deeper than I expected, even though I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. The truth was, I hadn't lost anything. The job at Morris & Associates had always been a mask, a carefully chosen cover while I built something far bigger behind the scenes. But Amanda didn't know that. And standing there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to her gloat, part of me wanted to scream the truth into the skyline. "I'm not the failure you think I am." Instead, I smiled faintly, staring out over the glittering chessboard of Manhattan, and let her think she'd won. "Whatever helps you sleep at night," she sneered before hanging up. It's strange how the people closest to us can sometimes be the ones who underestimate us the most. But in that moment, I realized something important. Their doubts are not your destiny. Just because someone can't see your worth, doesn't mean it isn't there, shining quietly, waiting for its time. As I set my coffee down and straightened my jacket, a new thought sparked in my mind. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Because sometimes the best way to honor your journey is to stop playing small. And that decision would set everything in motion. You see, while Amanda was busy chasing degrees and polishing her social standing, I was chasing something else entirely. Freedom. Real freedom. The kind that doesn't come from job titles or family approval. The kind you build with your own two hands. It all started back in college. Late nights in my tiny dorm room, surrounded by empty coffee cups and textbooks, coding an algorithm that could predict stock market trends more accurately than anything out there. While others crammed for exams or partied, I was wiring myself into a future no one else could see yet. First, no one noticed. I made a few small investments, quiet ones, using every penny I had saved from summer internships and part-time jobs. By my final year, those investments had multiplied enough to turn heads. If anyone had been paying attention. But I learned something early on. Success is quieter when it's real. So instead of flashing my wins, I played small. I took normal jobs after graduation. I accepted positions that looked ordinary on paper. Just another young professional trying to make her way in the city. All the while, behind that mask, I was growing something extraordinary. I still remember sitting in a rundown subway station, wearing a clearance rack suit, while finalizing my first major acquisition contract over a cracked phone screen. No one around me knew that a 24-year-old woman sitting cross-legged on a cold bench was about to close a deal worth more than most of them would earn in their lifetimes. And honestly, that anonymity tasted sweeter than any trophy ever could. Building quietly gave me the one thing most people never realize they need. Room to grow without the noise of other people's expectations. When no one's watching, you can experiment. You can fail and learn. You can rise, fall, and rise again, all without an audience judging your every step. But as the years passed, and the empire grew larger than I ever dared to imagine, a quiet question started to stir in my mind. How long can you live in the shadows before the shadows start living in you? It was a question I couldn't ignore for much longer, especially with Amanda's engagement party just around the corner. Living a double life sounds thrilling in the movies. In reality, it's exhausting. For 10 long years, I wore a mask. By day, I was the struggling consultant, hopping from job to job, always a step behind the successful ones. By night, and in the quiet hours no one ever saw, I was steering a billion-dollar empire through mergers, investments, and silent victories. I attended family dinners where Amanda would brag about her promotions, her luxury vacations, her designer handbags. And I would smile politely, sipping wine I could have bought the vineyard for, while pretending to envy her life. "Maybe someday you'll catch up," she'd tease, laughing, clinking her glass against mine. I laughed too, because sometimes pretending was easier than explaining a truth no one was ready to hear. I remember one Christmas Eve sitting at the kids' table, because there wasn't enough room at the adults' table, typing furiously on my phone under the tablecloth. What they thought was me playing Candy Crush was actually me negotiating the acquisition of a tech startup that would triple my company's valuation overnight. All while my aunt patted my hand and said, "Don't worry, Jessica. You'll find your path someday." Wearing a mask taught me something precious. You don't owe anyone proof of your worth before you're ready to reveal it. Real power, real success. It doesn't scream for attention. It waits, patiently, until the right moment to step into the light. And that moment was fast approaching. Because Amanda's engagement party wasn't just a celebration. It was the perfect stage. And whether I was ready or not, the curtains were about to rise. The invitation arrived in a heavy cream envelope, embossed in gold. Amanda's engagement party. Black tie, no exceptions. Course, she made sure to call me personally, just to remind me. "Try not to embarrass yourself, Jessica. There will be real business people there this time." I smiled as I hung up the phone. If only she knew. Preparing for that night felt different from all the others. It wasn't about blending in anymore. It wasn't about keeping the peace or playing small. It was about stepping into the life I had built, and doing it on my terms. I chose my outfit carefully. A bespoke midnight blue suit, tailored so precisely it felt like a second skin. On my wrist, a classic Philippe watch. Understated, but worth more than Amanda's entire wedding registry. And for the first time in years, I let myself feel it. Pride. Not arrogance. Not the need to prove anything. Just quiet, steady pride in the woman I had fought to become. As I stood before the mirror that evening, adjusting my cufflinks, I caught my reflection. Not the struggling consultant my family thought they knew, but the woman who had negotiated boardroom deals, built companies from nothing, and held empires in the palm of her hand. And tonight, the world that thought they knew Jessica would meet the real one. Life gives us stages, birthdays, weddings, engagements, moments where we gather and celebrate. But sometimes those stages aren't just for celebration. Sometimes they're meant for revelation, for stepping fully into your truth, even if it shakes the ground beneath others' feet. And as the car pulled up to the glittering venue that night, with the Manhattan skyline burning bright against the dark, I knew one thing for certain. By the end of this evening, nothing in our family would ever be the same again. The restaurant was dazzling. All crystal chandeliers and marble floors, the kind of place where dreams are toasted, and sometimes broken. Amanda was already in full command of the room when I walked in. She wore a shimmering designer gown, her laughter ringing out like a bell as she flitted from one guest to another, soaking up every compliment. And then she saw me. Her smile tightened just a little. "Oh, look," she called out, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Jessica actually showed up. And look, she even found something from the clearance rack to wear. Few people chuckled politely. Jonathan, her fiancé, stood stiffly beside her, avoiding my eyes. I smiled, a real one, and walked toward them, feeling the weight of years lifting off my shoulders with every step. "Congratulations, Amanda," I said warmly. "Jonathan," I added, giving him a small, knowing nod. That's when it happened. One of the board members from Peterson Global, a man who had only known me by title and power, not by face, spotted me from across the room. His eyes widened, and he began making his way over. Jonathan, realizing the collision that was about to happen, paled visibly. And then, in a voice that cracked under pressure, he blurted, "Chairman, Jessica." The room fell silent. A champagne glass slipped from Amanda's hand, shattering on the floor. Dozens of heads turned. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Amanda stared at me, eyes wide, mouth open but no sound coming out. In that moment, I learned something I'll never forget. The truth doesn't need to be shouted to shake the foundations of a world built on lies. Sometimes all it takes is standing quietly, fully in who you are, and letting the truth speak for itself. As Amanda stammered, struggling to process what she'd just heard, and as whispers rippled through the glittering crowd, I knew it was time to finish what had quietly begun so many years ago. Time to tell the story they thought they already knew. Time for the real Jessica to finally, fully step into the light. At this point in the story, if you were standing in Jessica's shoes, revealing your hidden truth after years of being underestimated, how would you feel? Would you feel proud, nervous, maybe even a little bittersweet? I would love to hear your thoughts. Please share your feelings in the comments below. Your voice matters more than you think. After what felt like an eternity of silence, someone, maybe Jonathan, had the sense to suggest moving the conversation somewhere more private. I followed my parents and Amanda into a side room, away from the curious eyes and whispered speculations of the guests. The door clicked shut behind us, and then the questions came all at once. How is this possible? Jessica, are you serious? Peterson Global. But that's worth billions. I stayed standing, feeling strangely calm, as if the years of pretending had finally been heavy enough. And now at last I could set them down. It's true, I said quietly. I built it. Slowly, quietly, from nothing. While you all thought I was failing, I was building. Amanda's face crumpled, mascara smudging under her wide, disbelieving eyes. My father, usually so quick to have an opinion, sat down heavily in a chair, his mouth working but no words coming out. And my mother, she just stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the very first time. But why? Amanda finally whispered, voice cracking. Why let us think you were struggling? Why hide it? I looked at each of them, feeling the old hurt bubble to the surface, not with anger, but with a strange kind of sadness. Because I needed to know, I said. I needed to know I could stand on my own. Without favors. Without expectations. Without strings. In that small, overheated room, I realized something important. Sometimes it's not the success you're hiding. It's your need for freedom. The desperate hope that somewhere you can become who you're meant to be without being shaped by the hands that raised you. The shock in their faces wasn't anger. Not really. It was grief. Grief for the years lost, the moments misunderstood, the daughter and sister they never truly knew. And as we sat there, breathing in that heavy silence, I realized the hardest part wasn't revealing the truth. It would be learning whether love could survive it. The silence in the room stretched long and thin, as fragile as glass. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice trembling in a way I had never heard before. Jessica, she said, do you know how many nights I lay awake, worrying you would never find your place in the world? I looked at her, at the pain in her eyes, and for the first time I understood. Their doubt hadn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it came from fear. I wasn't lost, I said gently. I was finding my own way. It just didn't look the way you expected. My father rubbed his hands over his face, still struggling to accept it. We thought we were helping, he muttered. The advice, the comparisons to Amanda, the job leads. We thought we were pushing you toward success. I nodded slowly. Maybe you were. But sometimes pushing feels a lot like pulling someone away from who they're meant to be. Amanda sat slumped in a chair, her engagement ring catching the light as she twisted it nervously. Finally, she looked up at me, her voice small. All those times I mocked you, called you a failure, compared you to everyone else. She shook her head, tears sliding down her carefully made-up face. And all along, you were signing my fiancé's paycheck. It would have been easy to gloat, but I didn't, because what I saw wasn't arrogance anymore. It was regret, peeling back the layers of resentment, pride, and assumptions. I found something surprising. Underneath it all, most pain comes from misunderstanding, not malice. And forgiveness often begins with seeing the broken hopes behind someone's harshest words. As we sat there, raw and real in a way we had never dared to be before, I realized the hardest walls to break aren't built from anger. They're built from disappointment and fear. And if we were going to rebuild from here, it would have to start with something simple. Something many families forget how to offer. Second chance. Rebuilding trust isn't like flipping a switch. It's more like planting a seed. Small, delicate, and painfully slow to grow. But that night, sitting among the ruins of old assumptions and broken pride, something real began to take root. I didn't demand apologies. I didn't list grievances. I simply said, if we're going to move forward, let's build something better. Together. And for once, nobody argued. A few weeks later, I set up something I had dreamed of for years. Not to show off, not to flaunt success, but to lift others the way I had lifted myself. Private family foundation. But there was a catch. Every project seeking funding had to be real. A solid business plan, a genuine purpose, no shortcuts, no favoritism. I still remember the first board meeting. Amanda arrived with a folder full of ideas. Not for another luxury boutique, but for a scholarship program she wanted to start in our grandparents' name. My father presented a consulting strategy he had crafted, humbler but far more thoughtful than any he had ever proposed before. And my mother, who once worried I would never find my way, reviewed proposals with sharp questions and a sharper pen, surprising even herself. Slowly, awkwardly, beautifully, we began to find new ways to trust each other again. Not because we forgot the past, but because we chose to believe in a better future. Trust isn't built by erasing old wounds. It's built by showing up day after day, willing to be better than you were before. It's built by choosing forgiveness, not once but again and again, even when it's hard. And as the seasons changed outside my office windows, I realized something even deeper. Forgiveness wasn't just for them. It was for me too. Because to truly move forward, I needed to let go of the past I had carried like armor for so long. And that next step, letting go, would prove even more powerful than any secret I had over the months that followed. Something extraordinary happened. The conversations around the dinner table shifted. Less about resumes and promotions. More about dreams, about ideas, about the kind of legacy we wanted to leave behind. Amanda stopped flashing designer brands and started flashing plans for community programs. My father stopped boasting about contracts and started mentoring young entrepreneurs. My mother, once so anxious about appearances, became the fiercest protector of authenticity in every project we supported. Money had once been the measuring stick in our family. For now, it was just a tool, not the point. One crisp autumn evening, we all gathered at my new home for a small family dinner. No suits, no speeches, no silent competitions. Just laughter, simple food, and the kind of warmth I had once thought impossible for us. As we sat around a crackling fireplace, Amanda raised her glass and said, "To Jessica, for teaching us that real success isn't about what you have, but about what you build together." It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was real, and that made it priceless. Healing doesn't erase the scars, teaches you to wear them differently, not as marks of shame, but as proof that you chose to love harder, believe deeper, and rebuild what others thought was broken beyond repair. As the night wound down and stars blinked awake in the sky, I stepped outside, looking up at the vastness above, and thought about how far we had come. The secrets, the masks, the hurt, all of it had led us here. Now, there was just one final step left in this journey. Not revenge, not triumph, but true, undeniable freedom. Ever kept. 6 months after Amanda's engagement party, we gathered again. This time, not under chandeliers and stiff suits, but in the simple, sun-drenched backyard of my home. A celebration of family, of second chances. As Amanda and Jonathan exchanged heartfelt vows in a small, genuine ceremony, I watched from my seat, no longer carrying the invisible weight of secrets. No mask, no half-truths, just the honest, sometimes messy beauty of who we had all become. My father clapped me on the back during the reception, a real, proud smile lighting up his face. My mother tucked her arm through mine and whispered, "You didn't just save yourself, Jessica. You saved us too." Later that evening, as golden hour bathed everything in soft light, Amanda came to stand beside me, barefoot in the grass, her shoes long abandoned somewhere by the dance floor. She nudged me gently. "You know," she said with a laugh, "if you had just told me you were secretly a billionaire, I might have treated you like royalty." Smiled back. "That was never the point." She grew serious. "I know," she said. "And I'm glad you didn't. Because I got to find out who you really are. And who I needed to become too. Growth isn't about proving others wrong. It's about becoming so true to yourself that there's nothing left to prove at all. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the quiet, courageous choice to build again where something once broke. And freedom, real freedom, is living your truth without needing anyone else's permission." As I stood there, watching my family laugh and dance under the open sky, I realized the empire I had spent so long building wasn't just about wealth. It was about building a life worth living, one rooted in truth, love, and second chances. And that, more than any title or fortune, was the legacy I truly wanted to leave behind. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this story. If there's one lesson to take away, it's this. True success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about staying true to yourself, even when no one else believes in you. Growth, forgiveness, and the quiet strength of building your own path. These are the real victories. I would love to hear your thoughts. After hearing Jessica's journey, how did it make you feel? Please share your feelings in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There are many more powerful stories waiting for you, and I can't wait to share them.